The fear of the far right and what it means. Dextrophobia is the fear of the right. This fear is often experienced to such a level that the fear turns to hatred. This fear may appear to be irrational, and in the larger context it is. But we are better off if we see this fear of the conservative as the fear of a demon face to face with Jesus. The fear of what spells your demise is so intense, it turns to hate. In our minds this fear might be irrational. Why fear God? But in the minds of those who do evil, those who do good are an existential threat. It is not life the left is protecting, it is their entire agenda. The evil left considers Trump an existential threat to America, which he is. All good men pose a threat to the America the left envisions. Good men are a threat to the agenda of the left. Good men are a threat to the future envisioned by the left. America approaches crises every 4 or 5 years at the end of the election cycle. The American Republic is in a constant state of crises that ebbs and flows from near collapse to bitter acrimony, but then, creating a three-way Mexican standoff was not a sensible way to prevent tyranny. When one half of the state is subject to serious bouts of paranoia and psychopathology, things are always going to look unstable. The America polity is a system that only survives because of an immense effort on the part of the few sane. But which side is the sane one? That is the question never answered with real evidence. The left has such a fear of the right that it translates into a phobia. There is no trust on the left, not even for those on the left. Which is why they are dependent on a strong centralized state. Either a person is in sync with whatever is on the left, or he or she is treated as the enemy. The trust between people on the left is that fragile. Fear and absence of trust fuels division. The major division is between the political left and right, but the left is so full of hate, it will not let its guard down, even when dealing with its own group members. There is no path to reconciliation. However, as mentioned, this internal distrust is not as irrational as it may seem. This fear that transforms into hatred is based on a kind of paradox. The Chinese have a saying that a man who saves the life of another creates an enemy for life. The reason for this is that we hate being obliged to others, we hate owing favors we cannot pay, and the left is eternally indebted to the right. Neither right nor left is without its problems, but the left faces a paradox. Fear paralyzes humans when they cannot either fight or flee. The left is in a paradox of its own making. Humans are designed to live in groups. We are dependent on each other. If not at minimum, embrace the family unit, we would go extinct in a generation. This too is a source of the left's anxiety. They can fear the other sex and the bonds that must be formed to create a family, but it does not overcome the design protocols that limit what is possible. Every gay, transsexual and gender-confused leftist is a product of a biological union, and the family is the only reason society exists. The left hates the family and fears it, yet they cannot escape from it, nor do they dare to totally destroy it. They are condemned to remain a part of something they ostensibly hate. This situation defines the left and its dilemma. No matter how they hate and attempt to destroy the family, they are always intimately part of one. There is not one gay, transgender, bisexual, queer, two-spirit or any of the other qualified categories of being, that was not born of man and woman, that does not have a mother and a father and that will not have his or her genetic line disappear, if they do not likewise create a biological union. Everyone knows what a man and a woman is, when it comes time to have children. No transgender couple hires a biological man to carry their child. The far right is represented by the traditional family. The left hates it because the family, more than anything, represents the categorical truth. There is a reality and there is design, and reality is implacable in its coherence. We can fight truth, but we cannot win, and every battle we think we have won is accompanied by substantial losses. There is no Pyrrhic victory greater than the wins of the left. The right has no need to fight such battles, for the left ultimately loses the more they win. Every child they transgender is an adult whose genetic code is lost. Observe the transgender debate. The left can win every argument and mutilate every child that comes into their hands, but in the end, all of these mutilated children will grow up and begin to understand what was taken from them. The right does not need to win a single battle to win the war. Evil is self-destructive, it cannot its own way, and so it must make war and rob just to stay alive. If it has no one else to fight or exploit, it cannibalizes itself and commits autophagy, consuming less vital supporting elements to maintain its core institutions. None of this appears to explain why the progressives are terrified of the far right, and why every question is met with hostility, however. To question someone on the left about the social agenda is to call into question their raison d'etre. The left is progressive because they lack a sustainable pathway. What they do and value has no legitimacy, and so their narrative is full of hate and the need for restitution. It's a way for a criminal to justify the crimes they do. No black person will blame slavery on Africans, nor will a native explain the residential school system on environmental conditions, namely the difficulty of educating widely dispersed populations that have no history of literacy. There is always a malignancy attribute to everything whites do, asserted in order to justify the left's own lack of self-sufficiency. If the left was earning the wealth and the right demanding the handouts, the left would not fear us. It would have less need to censor us. But if your life depends on an access road that cut through someone else's property, you would be fearful of anything that threatened its use. The right is akin to the owner of a well to which someone has a deeded right to access, but that deeded right is being called into question. Obviously, the left would have more of a vested interest in preserving the right to access the right-of-way or to the well, than the owner of the well would have in overturning it. This is the problem the right faces. Our focus is on work and paying our bills. The left is focused on getting more benefits. The right, by the very nature of the war we are in, is on defense, and defense is never a winning strategy. We need to turn this war of protectionism into a war of liberation. But this is not the totality of the dynamic we face. Imagine a population that was fully sustainable and self-sufficient. There would be no need for the state. The state needs victims and the needy to justify its existence. The state needs victims and victims need the state. The state needs the free market, but the free market does not need the state. Those who operate in the free market do not need charity, but charities need them. Nor does the market need intersectional identities, but the state needs them. There is no greater enabler than the state. The last thing the state desires is a free market, yet it cannot survive without it. Indeed, it decays proportionally with the loss of the free market, which the state itself destroys. The state is in the position of not being able to survive in a free market, and not being able to live without the wealth free markets create. Those who embrace the free market and are self-supporting do not need the state. If someone earns their own way and never infringes upon the rights of others, he wants a minimal or even no state. If there is no free riding permitted, the state would have no function and would disappear. The Patriot Act is the only law we need. It sets out the rights of a creator. No one has the right to infringe upon the rights of the creator. No one has the right to take from an author any part of an authored work. No creator of any work, regardless of whether this work is of the hands or mind, has an obligation or duty to share the fruits of his labor, regardless of the situation or environment, with any other person or agency, the exception or proviso being that upon marriage two becomes one. In marriage, the spouse represents the same claim as the subject. This is biblical. If it was implemented as a Christian principle and constitutional clause, the state would be made redundant, and all laws could be set aside. This statement is all a high-functioning society needs, and it is derived directly from the truth that God created all the physical universe, including us. We have a right only to what we create, and this right is wholly and solely attached to the person who adds value to the things of God. That is the only creation man is capable of. The church that does not implement this policy is outside of the kingdom of God. The church and state are not equivalents nor compatible. Indeed, church and state are mirror images in a reconcilable conflict. If we as the church understand this statement of rights, the state would be made redundant. However, the state does not want to be made irrelevant. The state fears any principle that strikes at its heart. Its raison d'etre is to protect and advance the interests of the nation. But the nation is an abstraction created to give the state a reason for existing. The nation is a make-work strategy invented by the state. The so-called far right, even if they do not consciously see through this farce, do not do what requires any intervention by the state. So conservatives will be far less ready to fund projects set out by the state or to fight for the implementation of programs operated by the state. In fact, the tendency will be for the conservative to just wish the state would leave them alone. This puts the right on the defensive. The right knows they have a right to what they create, but they lack the terminology to express this. The Christian separatist movement exists to give Christians the language needed to voice their position. The Christian separatist movement works to put into words the left's greatest fear, the language of isolationism. The ideas that permit us to divide from the left. Dextrophilia,